If you enjoyed the channel and our video content and would like to support us, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sign up to our Patreon site, which is a monthly subscription to one of our 4 tiers, each giving you something different from early access interviews up to exclusive unseen footage. There's also the option of a one-off donation via PayPal, which allows you the option to donate an amount of your choice. Both options really help to keep this channel going and to continue putting out regular content for you good folk. So please take a look at aircrewinterview.tv/donate, and I thank you in advance. Thank you and enjoy.
I'd done my 2 tours on the Buccaneer. The Tornado was due to come into service. It was obviously the step to take. You want to go on to the next shiny new aeroplane.
Yeah.
But I was actually posted to the nav training school, and I really didn't want to do that. So I prevailed upon my flight commander to make representations. So the posting was then changed to go on to the 3rd Tornado Squadron back in 1982.
Nice. So what were your first thoughts on the Tornado? It is a good looking jet, I have to say.
It was a bit short, I thought.
Right.
It looked a bit stubby, but it did look nice, and certainly the cockpit looked modern, it looked electronic. It looked like it could do the job, and indeed it could.
So what was the role of the Tornado when it entered the service?
When it came in, it was exactly the same as the Buccaneer. It was strike attack, so nuclear and conventional weaponry, but day and night, all weather. The Buccaneer really had a very limited all-weather role. It was nuclear only, whereas we could take conventional bombs and deliver them accurately.
Brilliant stuff. So can you talk us through some of your ground and flying training on the Tornado?
Yeah, I went through the Triple T at Cottesmore. I think I went through on the German squadron, and I flew with an Italian pilot. It was great. It was a more relaxed environment than an RAF OCU, more structured. If you went in the morning and you were due to fly at 8 o'clock, as I remember on several occasions I was, and the weather wasn't suitable, that was it. You wouldn't fly for the day. Whereas on an RAF OCU, they would jiggle things around a little bit. So it was a bit more relaxed, but lots of fun and nice working with the other 2 nations. Yeah,
how did you get on with nations? Was there like a cultural kind of divide there?
Not really. There was a bit of a language barrier. German guys generally spoke really good English. Some of the Italians had done a relatively limited English language course and had just finished their training. But no, we worked together well, and we mixed together well. I haven't kept in touch with any of them, but I have nothing but good memories of my time there.
Yeah. Why was it based in the UK and not Italy or Germany, for instance?
Some sort of political decision, I don't know.
Yeah. How many jets were there? It must have been a fair few.
I think there were probably around 30. I would guess we had about 10 on each squadron. There was a British, an Italian, and a German squadron.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, can you talk us through the cockpit of the Tornado, and was it anything similar to the Buccaneer?
No, not really. It was well laid out, certainly for the start. It was dominated by a moving map and radar display, a big round display. And that was great. And then 2 TV displays, which are a bit high. I would have preferred those lower, only so that the forward view would have been a bit better.
Did all the systems work pretty well from back in the day for the new technology?
Well, our usual raft of teething troubles and a bit of a shortage of spares at times. Aeroplanes were coming into service faster than the spares supply system would deliver them. But when it worked really well, and I mean really well. I did a green flag exercise at Nellis Air Force Base, and the system would show accuracy to 60 feet. And after an hour and a half, I landed back at Nellis, and it was 60 feet out.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I'd not touched it. It was phenomenal. When it worked, it was really good.
Before we move on, because you mentioned green flag there, can you talk us about this? Because I think you won the first Tornado flag, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah, green flag was a sort of electronic version of red flag. And of course, the Tornado had a really comprehensive electronic warfare suite. We had a big capable jamming pod and a big, I think it was a Swedish chaff and flare pod. I think we could dump as much chaff as any aeroplane except the B-52. And we were cleared to use it. And we had a good radar warning receiver. So the idea was we were supposed to go there and fly moderately high for a low-level aeroplane. I think they wanted us to fly at 750 feet. We didn't. Because part of our rationale was that the lower you were, the less chance that you had of being detected.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be detected because the electronics wouldn't work all the time necessarily. Mm-hmm. Frequency agility and things is often difficult to keep up with.
Yeah. And what aircraft were there on that flag? And did you work with the F-111s or anything like that?
Yeah, we did. There were big packages. We had everything from F-5s to F-18s. Nice. And the packages would be mixed. You'd have Wild Weasel support, so they would go in ahead, fighters overhead to counter the red air. And that happened every day apart from one. And on one day, the weather was poor.
So that's it.
They said, right, we're not flying. And our boss said,
that must have been.
Excuse me, yeah, we can TFR. So off we went on our own into the range, auto TFR. And again, there were no confirmed kills against us.
Really?
Yeah,
so
it was really satisfying to be the only ones out there. I think we flew a 6-ship that day. And to be the only ones out there, out in the range, and have all of the threats against you and still to come back, knowing we delivered the weapons on target, because that's all filmed, and had landed back largely unscathed.
That's amazing. I think you sent me a picture. Did you win a bombing competition or something like that?
That was a little bit later, about a year later, yeah, and that was against the USAF Strategic Air Command. It was they have this annual competition. It's about improving their ability to deliver nuclear weapons. And the RAF had been invited the year before with the Tornado and had gone over and won it. And I think it took the Americans a bit by surprise. They invited the RAF a second time, and 27 Squadron was tasked to go over there. I don't think the Americans were quite as accommodating as they had been the first time.
Just because you won the first time?
I think it was a bit of a shock. But they lost our flight plans. We had, one of my best memories is a very attractive young lady turned up. I was on my own in the planning room, and she turned up with this plate of home-baked cookies, and she had on a flying suit with a zip and down, and she wanted some basic information. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't fall for that. Yeah. I did take the cookies, and I kept her talking for a few minutes before sending her on her way, and we enjoyed the cookies very much.
Yeah. How long were you over there for?
We were over there for, must have been 2 or more months.
And were you on base, or were you living outside?
We were on an Air Force base, living off in a hotel, but working on the base. It was quite an intense time, 6 days a week, and the sorties were 6.5 hours long. So we had a number of practice sorties. Obviously, we had to get used to the operating area, then a number of practice sorties, and then the competition sorties themselves. And it was day and night flying.
So you didn't really get time for yourself?
We got a little bit. Yeah, we got a little bit. You can't work for that length of time, 6 days a week, not to maintain a level of performance, which is what we had to do. So yeah, we did get time to look around and take it easy. And the guys who weren't competition crews, there were 4 and 2 reserve competition crews, they had a little bit more time to go around and see things.
Nice stuff. So getting back to talking a bit more about the Tornado, could you feel the power with the reheats coming from the Bucc, or was there no difference there?
No, there was a lot of power with the reheat. You really could feel it. Dry power, it just didn't feel right, but you get a real kick up the backside with the reheat in. Even with stuff hanging on it, it was noticeable when it was clean. It was absolutely superb because it burned a lot of fuel.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Even with more modern engines?
Oh yeah. These are engines developed in the 1970s. I'm sure they were better when the Tornado went out of service in whenever it was, 2019. But yeah, you could really feel it. And if you needed it, it was great to have that power.
I could imagine. So what were the strengths and weaknesses of the Tornado?
The kit, the ability to accurately bomb a point on the ground, something you couldn't see with your eye or on the radar, and to bomb it with, you know, accuracies of feet. And I don't mean 10 feet, I mean 0 feet, and time. And then to be able to do that in any weather.
That must have been a leap forward.
Oh, it was. It was huge. It just didn't have the range of the Buccaneer. It just didn't have the fuel, which is a shame.
All right.
But,
okay.
you know, there are swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely. Did you ever conduct DACT in the Tornado? I know it's an air-to-ground platform. Did you get bounced by other
Yeah,
fighters?
we would always get bounced, and it was part of operating in both the UK and in Germany. You know, if you were a fighter, you were on the lookout for a target, and if you were that prospective target, you were always eyes out looking for the fighters. And you know, it was a matter of personal pride not to get bounced unseen.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure we all did, but I even remember bouncing an F-16 in a Buccaneer.
Really?
And he didn't see us. And I was with our station commander at the time.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So where would you fly the Tornado? Because I know, like, the Mach Loop's famous now. Was it still back then when the Mach
It wasn't called the Mach Loop,
Right.
but yeah, there were places you would go. But yeah, wherever the weather was decent, we weren't allowed to do much IMC low level in peacetime. It was always difficult. We had to go elsewhere for that. So it was wherever the weather was suitable, up into the Highlands of Scotland, into Wales, you know, wherever around the UK. And based at Marham, as 27th Squadron was, we had ready access to tankers.
Yeah.
So we could top up on the way there or the way back. It was good training for them and us.
So you also held a nuke role with the Tornado. Can you tell us about this? And was it different from the Bucc? Was there different procedures there?
No, the procedures are exactly the same. What was interesting and challenging on the Tornado was because it was a new aeroplane, we had guys who came to the aeroplane with no nuclear experience whatsoever. Right. Guys came from air defense Phantoms, Lightnings, UK Jaguars, Harriers, training. So probably half of the squadron had got no nuclear experience at all. The other half, people like me off the Buccaneer, we had people off the Vulcan, the Germany Jaguars, we had nuclear experience. So the trick was to marry the non-experience with the experience and try and get everybody up to speed as quick as possible.
Was that difficult, like, if people didn't have that experience beforehand?
Not really. The processes were there. They were well laid out. We spent a lot of time on the training. I actually ran the training program to get us strike qualified as a squadron. Everybody knew it was our primary role. Everybody knew it was incredibly serious, and everybody knew that you got one chance and you got it right, or that was it. And should a squadron ever have failed its evaluation, I suspect the squadron commander would have been fired on the spot.
Really?
It was that serious.
Right.
And we all took it that serious.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many squadrons held a nuclear QRA?
In the end, on the Tornado, there were 4 Bruggen, I think 3 at Larbrook, but then there were other NATO squadrons around. I'm not sure if the Canadians did. The Americans obviously did, the Dutch, the Germans, the Belgians. So there were a fair few airplanes on QRA at any one time. I think they say they were the best part of 100. That's probably about right.
And did you ever meet up with other nations to discuss, like, the nuclear role, or did you just get on with your own thing?
We did meet them. We didn't really discuss it.
Right.
It was all fairly highly classified. There was a lot you weren't allowed to discuss.
Even in NATO?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
There was a lot you weren't allowed to discuss in the squadron. You weren't allowed to discuss your own target. We were allocated targets. Not every crew, but if you were one of the if you like, the select crews, you were allocated a target and you studied that target. You certainly couldn't discuss it with anyone else. But what would happen is, during an evaluation, a NATO evaluation, the evaluators would come in and they were cleared. Obviously, they would ask you about your target. They would ask you about your weapons, your weapon delivery. And you had to know this thing almost from memory. you weren't allowed to consult the map. You had to know how long it took you from takeoff to dropping the weapon. You know, what the final waypoint was, what the 2 or 3 key features on that final run-in from the final waypoint to the target, what your escape heading was, and what the weapon settings were. All that had to come from memory.
And I think if I remember rightly, someone said like during a test you had to get 100%.
Oh yes.
Yes, there's not even like 1% margin.
No,
there.
and the test was really extensive. They would test you on a rig, a ground rig. It was done by different groups, but the ultimate test was the test of QRA itself. And NATO would come in, and they would say, "Okay, I want that crew to cockpit readiness." So you would get into the cockpit, and they would time you to getting in the cockpit, and you would check in. You'd then be stood down. And what would happen then is another aeroplane with weapons and crew would be generated, and they would be allocated to the QRA role.
Right.
You and your aeroplane then would have the weapons taken off and practice weapons put on. You would plan what was called an equivalent route, so a peacetime route around Germany or perhaps around the UK, but the same sort of length as the real route and the same sort of target, and then you'd have to fly it. And what would happen is you'd start in the cockpit, and they would launch you using nuclear procedures, and they would chase you. They would follow you with another aircraft, usually one of your own, but sometimes another NATO nation's aircraft, and they would check that you didn't deviate from the route, that you did attack the target successfully, and the whole thing would culminate with dropping a practice bomb on the range, because that would use the aircraft's nuclear circuitry, and that would demonstrate that you could meet the what's called ACE standards, the Allied Command Europe standards, for both weapon delivery in terms of distance and time. And you had to achieve those. There wasn't any, it was close. Oh yeah. Yeah, it was quite a stressful time.
I can imagine. Did you practice the conventional role as well, or were you strictly a nuclear?
Oh no, we practiced a conventional role, and there was a lot of similarity. The way we attacked targets was very similar. They were either level or loft deliveries. The difference was that the nuclear role, you were on your own. Right. You would get airborne as a singleton. You might get airborne as one of a stream, but you were all going very quickly your own way to your own target. Whereas in the conventional role, there would be 2, 4, 6, 8 aeroplanes all going off to a target together. So a fair amount of mutual protection.
Did the JAG hold their nuclear role, or was it?
I believe the JAGs did it down at Bruggen, yes.
Yeah, right. So what was life like on 27 Squadron?
It was a lot of fun. Brand new aeroplane. We were, to some extent, developing how best to use it. A lot of visitors, a lot of people wanted to come and see the aeroplane, which distracted from getting ourselves operational and developing the operating procedures. But a good bunch of guys. Yeah, we had a few new guys, first tourists, but generally, an eclectic background or backgrounds. But a good bunch of guys, a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So, just talking about the Tornado itself. Did you, I mean, obviously you in the back cockpit, but could you feel the wing sweep going back and forth?
Oh, yes.
You could feel that, right?
Yeah, you could. And just occasionally you need to remind the guy in the front that actually
wings.
At this speed we ought to have the wings all the way back. And I remember flying with OC Ops on one sortie. I said, 67 wings. Oh yeah. It would just be a bit uncomfortable flashing around really fast with the wings still sitting at 45.
Yeah. So on 27, did you always fly with tanks on? Because I know the TTE, didn't they fly?
Yeah,
clean?
we flew them clean at Cottesmore, but yes, always with tanks on. Always with tanks, and always with the outboard stores. So the jamming pod, the Sky Shadow jamming pod on one side, and the BOS chaff and flare pod on the other side.
Right. Did you ever get to fly clean on 27?
Only, no, actually I didn't on 27.
Really?
I did on my last squadron, 14. I delivered an aeroplane back to Wharton for some work, and it was clean. So we actually got to do a supersonic run over the Irish Sea.
Lucky bugger. So you're talking about 14 there. Was there a big difference coming from 27, or did you just fit straight in?
Straight in. I actually I went from 27 to the Tornado Operational Evaluation Unit, and then on to 14. But I knew most of the guys on 14,
right, so
certainly most of the senior guys.
Yeah. Because I always think like we're turning up to a squadron, it must be like your first day at school, you're a bit nervous, and was it like that for you?
No, not really,
No,
because
right.
you do know them. And of course, on any strike squadron, they welcome you with open arms, because the sooner you're strike qualified, the sooner you take a bit of the load, particularly those bases that held QRA. Because until you're strike qualified, you can't do QRA, and that means everybody else is doing a bit more.
Yeah.
So that, you know, they want you in and strike qualified. So somebody like me coming from the strike role in Germany, you know, it was great for them because they could get me up to speed very quickly and get me into QRA.
So again, you probably have many here, Terry, but can you share a few stories from your time on the Tornado that stick out?
Yeah, there are so many. Coming out of the mist at HMS Invincible, but I'm sure they thought there was nobody going to be able to attack them. Out in the North Sea somewhere, it was an exercise. Again, the Tornado was so good for that. And I'm convinced to this day that they thought we would just, you know, try to pull the wool over their eyes with our radio calls. And then we came out of the mist at low level and flew by. Yeah, on the bombing competition, I think my the last competition sortie was into the Nellis Ranges to drop practice bombs.
Nice.
All the targets were what were called no-show. They were geographic points, nothing to mark them. And as we ran in, I was marking a hilltop. What we did is we measured if you like, the range and bearing, to put it simply, of the hilltop from the target, and the system, you mark the hilltop, the system would point at the target. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's a simple explanation. And as we ran in, Mal, my pilot, we're getting close, and he said, there's something there. I said, I can't, but we'll keep going. And as we released, we then turned, and we did a turn, not too far a turn, and a climb. We were climbing up to meet the tanker and then go back to base. And I looked over my shoulder, and the aiming point was marked with a series of white sticks. They were probably about 1 meter high, and there was smoke from our bomb right in the middle of the white sticks. And I was absolutely convinced that we got a direct hit, and indeed we had. We saw it a bit later.
That's incredible.
A few weeks later, to be honest. But yeah, no, that was really good. Yeah, things like that. But one of the other memories, again, not that trip, but a very similar one, and it's not my memory, when you joined up with the tanker took over the responsibility for navigation and timing. We were really critical on timing. And of course, the tanker, the Victor, had no kit at all.
Right.
We had time, I'll show you, to plus or minus 1 second, and the tanker took over responsibility, and all the way down through wherever it was we were going, and the tanker, we were sitting there with my time early late just clicking back and forth between one early, one late, and it was the navigator in the tanker working a circular Dalton computer.
Really?
Yeah, to keep the timing accurate, and he dropped us off at the release point, bang on time. Absolutely phenomenal piece of airmanship from him.
That's incredible. So how many hours did you get on the Tornado?
Oh, over 1,000 hours on the Tornado.
So you got a 1,000-hour badge in this one.
I have indeed, yeah, I have. And I really enjoyed that, and I don't recall any of it I thought were just, you know, boring holes in the sky here.
Yeah.
It was really great.
We've got some personal ones to wrap up the interview here, Terry. So do you have any hobbies?
I still fly. I fly a microlight. But looking at the weather here, it's not microlight day. I don't fly in poor weather. I mean, I can, and I have flown my microlight in poor weather, but I look to fly when the sun's shining and the wind isn't very strong. And I just look to go to other farm strips. And I happily take people. I do a lot of charity flights, raising money for things like air ambulance. I've even done some of the British Legion. And I play a lot of pickleball. And you're going to say, what's pickleball?
Yeah,
pickleball, if you imagine tennis,
right?
It's a low net, a badminton-sized court. The bat, called a paddle, is a bit bigger than a table tennis bat, and it's a wiffle ball, one of these hard plastic balls with holes in. It's Britain's fastest-growing sport.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very enjoyable, and it's a great sport for men and women mixed, because the way the ball, the paddle, and the rules are arranged, it takes away power as an advantage.
Right.
So it's about control of the ball, particularly control up close to the net.
Pickleball, that's the first time I've ever heard that.
I'll look it up on YouTube.
Cheers for that, Joey. Favourite aircraft you've flown?
I like the Shadow Microlight. It was a tandem two-seat, but it was a real fighter cockpit, right-hand stick, left-hand throttle. Tiger Moth, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say a Bucc. I did think you were going to say a Bucc.
I always wanted to fly the Tiger Moth from, teenage years, and my 60th birthday, my children bought me an hour in a Tiger Moth. I really enjoyed that.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
One you wish you could fly either past or present?
I think the Hurricane or the Mosquito, either of those two. I've flown the Spitfire.
Have you really?
Yeah. Again, I think the last 70th birthday, my children bought me a Spitfire flight. I think probably of the two, the Mosquito. I think I'd quite like to have a go at the Mosquito.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
So we got one from my old patrons here. This is from Joe Kunsley. In the Tornado, did you ever work with the IR pod?
No. We, on the Operational Evaluation Unit, did some work on it, but I never did.
Right.
I tended to concentrate on the electronic systems and some of the navigation stuff. Not solely, but certainly not on the IR pod.
And can we find you online? Because I've seen some of your photos and they're brilliant. Are they available online anywhere?
No, I don't have much of an online presence. In fact, I don't have any of an online presence. No, my identity was stolen a few years ago, so I now restrict what I put online.
Probably
perhaps being too cautious, but just the way I am.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Terry, thanks very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome, and thank you to you and all your patrons. You've brought back some wonderful memories for me, so thank you very much for that.
Cheers.